Carl Frampton versus Scott Quigg tomorrow night is here. A lot of people have been asking me for my final prediction. Well, I can't call it. Like a lot of people, I see this fight as a 50-50 and a genuine 50-50 going in. It might not play out as a 50-50. We'll have to wait and see. But going into the fight, I'm finding it incredibly difficult to split them. For a long time, definitely over a year or two, in my head, I've been riding with Carl Frampton all the way. I always felt like he would beat Scott Quigg and beat him decisively. But since those initial thoughts, I feel like Scott Quigg has improved as a fighter significantly. And Carl Frampton has shown vulnerabilities lately. I've always felt that Frampton was the better schooled of the two. I feel like he always had a better boxing brain and was more versatile. But as I say, in his last fight, he was dropped. And to me, Scott Quigg has improved. And also the psychological element seems to be in Scott Quigg's favor going into this fight. Now, I have to say that Team Frampton are always very emotional going into most fights. You got Barry McGuigan, who's an emotional guy. Carl Frampton's a very fiery type of character, and that's normal for them. And I've said this before about different fighters in other fights, but alarm bells should always start ringing prior to a fight when a fighter is behaving out of character. If you've got a fighter who is normally emotional and fiery and has performed very well while being emotional and fiery, then obviously you shouldn't read too much into him being emotional and fiery in terms of seeing it as a negative thing. If he's always like that, then, it is what it is. That's how he is. It's not going to necessarily negatively affect his performance any more than normal. A good example would be Nigel Benn. Nigel Benn was a very emotional character, and he actually thrived on that emotion. He was one of those kind of guys where he needed that emotion. He needed that fire. He needed to be fired up and almost angry going into a fight to get the best out of himself. And you saw that when he fought people like Barkley and McClellan, etc., etc. You could say it kind of worked against him, maybe against Michael Watson and Eubank in the first fight, but I guess that was inexperience as well. But yeah, certainly against McClellan, he needed that fire, he needed that energy, he needed that emotional high to get through that fight and win it. And later on in Nigel Benn's career, when he fought guys like Steve Collins, you could tell going into the fight, Nigel Benn just didn't have that emotional energy anymore. He was flat. And as I say, for him, emotion worked well. Carl Frampton may be that kind of guy. I mean, I don't think he's quite as emotional and erratic as Nigel Benn, but it could be a similar type situation where that camp need emotional energy and what have you, and aggression, and they thrive off that. And maybe if Carl Frampton and Barry McGuigan and the whole team going into such a big fight as this were kind of flat and subdued, maybe that would be a bad thing. I'm not saying it would, I'm just throwing that idea out there. So definitely going into the fight, it seems as though Scott Quigg is the more calm of the two, and he seems to have got under Frampton and McGuigan's skin. In fact, the whole Scott Quigg team, like Joe Gallagher and Eddie Hearn, seem to have got right under the skin of Team McGuigan. And as I say, I don't know how much to read into that because Team McGuigan are normally emotional anyway, but it just adds a different dimension to the fight because it's just another thing to consider. And that's why I find it impossible to pick between them. As I say, I've always felt that Frampton is the more skilled of the two, but Quigg has been improving. Frampton looked very poor, I felt, in his last fight. So I don't know. Quigg's obviously taller. He's probably got the reach. In good form lately, stopping guys early. Frampton has been hurt early. I don't know. The pedigree of Frampton, but the momentum is with Quigg. if any of you guys have a clear view of who you think is going to win the fight, then please drop it in the comment section below. But I know for a fact that there's a lot of people who are like me. They're sitting on the fence for this fight. And there's a lot of people who are normally very decisive when it comes to picking fights, when it comes to doing fight predictions. They're normally very decisive and say, yep, this guy's going to win. But for this one right here, Frampton versus Quigg, there is a whole heap of people like me just sitting on the fence and can't pick between the two of them. And that's what's great about boxing. That means that nobody can complain with these two being matched up against each other, because there's very few people who see this as a mismatch. Yeah, there's going to be some, but the majority of people, particularly the neutral fans, a lot of them are finding it very, very difficult to pick. And that's obviously a good thing. That means you got, at least on paper, two evenly matched fighters. May the best man win. Hopefully we'll be in for a good fight. In terms of the outcome, obviously I can't decide who's going to win, but I would probably guess that this fight would more than likely go to points. A knockout is definitely possible, but I feel like Scott Quigg is tough enough to survive a Frampton onslaught. And I feel like Frampton is wily enough and skilled enough to be able to survive a Scott Quigg onslaught. That's what I feel. Maybe I'll be wrong. Someone might end up getting blasted out in a round or two. But that's just my gut feeling going into the fight. The fight will probably go the distance. I just hope, as I say, that it's going to be a barnstormer. Yeah, I hope it's going to be a classic. So, yeah, drop your comments in the comment section below, people. Let me know how you feel about this fight, if you do have a strong inkling about who's going to win the fight either way. All right? It's your boy Hatman. I'm out.